Well, hi everybody, and welcome to our Church360 Ledger Complete Overview webinar. I'm Anna Johnson. I'm a marketing manager here at Concordia Technology Solutions, and I'll be hosting today. Before we get started, if we can just do a quick test with those of you who are here, if you're able to hear me and see my screen right now, if you wouldn't mind sending me a quick message in the questions box just to let me know so that when we get started, I'm sure that you're hearing and seeing everything that I'm doing. Again, thanks for coming today. Our theme for the day is how to efficiently track your church finances with Church360 Ledger. As I said, I'm Anna Johnson. There's my picture and my phone number and email. I'm a marketing manager here at Concordia Technology Solutions, and I'll be walking you through the software today. If at any time, either during the webinar or after the webinar, you think of a question that you weren't able to ask today, just please jot down that email and phone number, and I'll try and get back to you as quickly as possible. Just so you all know, Concordia Technology Solutions is the church administration division of Concordia Publishing House, and Concordia Publishing House is the publishing arm of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. Now, even though our main market for some of our more theological resources here is indeed the LTMS, our church software was built for any church denomination and bind. So even if you're coming from a denomination that's not the LCMS, we think the software will work well for you today. For those of you who aren't too familiar with Concordia Publishing House, we've been around quite a while. Here's a fun picture I always like to show. It's a picture of our booth at the 1904 World's Fair. And as you can imagine, especially in terms of technology, things have changed quite a bit since then. You can see those guys didn't have computers, we're just organizing things by hand, but actually we've been producing software here at Concordia Publishing House since 1984. I know usually in these webinars we do have people who are familiar with our other church technology software, Shepherd Staff, and that's what we've been developing since then. Here's a nice little picture of our Innovation Center. I always like to show that. It's one of the more exciting and interesting places here where we get to collaborate and have fun. Just a quick outline of what we'll be doing today. We have 60 minutes for the presentation. Usually how that breaks down is that for the first 15 or so minutes, I'll be going through these introduction slides, and then for the remaining 45 minutes of that, I'll be walking through the software with you, just so you know. And then we have allotted 30 minutes for questions. If we don't have that many questions, we'll just end the webinar early today. You're always allowed to ask questions throughout using that chat box in the webinar software, but just so you know that I might not answer them until we get to the end. And the recording will be shared. So as many of you saw in the introduction emails, if there's someone at your church who's not able to attend, or if I just go too fast today, which is definitely a possibility, definitely use that recording. I'll try and send it out later today, definitely before I leave, so that you and everyone at your church has access to that. A little bit more about Church360 Ledger. Church360 Ledger is one product in a suite of products called Church360, and the 360 stands for Complete Church Management. So the Ledger component is that finance and accounting component. We also have Church360 Members, which some of you may be familiar with. That's our church management software. So people use that for gathering their congregation information, giving history, managing events. And then we also have Church360 Unite, which is our church website builder software. And all of these three components work together in different ways. As you'll see today, some information from members, especially with offerings, gets sent over to Church360 Ledger if you have both those products. And then we also have a shared member database between members and Unite. So if you have the complete suite of products, you really do get a lot of interaction between each of those three components. When we were designing Church360 Ledger, we knew that something had to be different. There's a lot of finance softwares out on the market that are very powerful, very much aimed towards people who do accounting every day, but we wanted something different for Church360 Ledger. We wanted these three things. First of all, we wanted it to be intuitive, because we know that not everybody helping out in church finances does have a background in finance. Someone like myself, I know at my previous workplace, I was kind of just thrown in as the young person who could maybe figure out the finance software even though I wasn't trained in accounting. So we know that many churches and organizations have a structure like that. We want the software to be easy for you to use and understand, even if you're not used to working with finance. Our second thing on the list here is that we wanted it to be secure, especially with a web-based product like this. I know there's many concerns about the safety of your information, especially when we're talking about finances. So when we were designing this, our developers definitely kept that security in mind. And we also wanted the software to be focused just on churches. So as you'll see in a couple minutes here, the software is built around fund-based accounting and double entry bookkeeping so that it only focuses on those things your church uses. We don't have a lot of the extra plugins that maybe a more powerful church finance software might have. And that's really to make things easier for you to use. But when we were developing the software, we also had this human side to the development because we know that talking about church finances can be difficult. Whether you're the person sitting in the pew hearing that money sermon that comes around maybe once or twice a year, or if you're the pastor and you're there to care for your people, but you also know that we need finances and revenue to keep the church up and running. It's a very difficult subject. It's a very touchy subject because even whatever donations you do get, every dollar has been donated. It's not like a business where you're increasing revenue through your different products. These are gifts that comes from people's heart. They come because they want your church to aid your church in that important mission of sharing the gospel. So because of that, stewardship has to be critical. I know for many of us in our churches, we're always worried if we're using those funds in the best way possible, if we're reaching the most people with the outreach events, activities, the offerings we do. And it also makes accountability critical. We know that there are people out there, unfortunately, who might see churches as an easy target and who might think that because you're a church, you're not secure or accountable enough with your finances to notice things that are happening that are out of the ordinary. So our software wanted to keep these two things in mind, stewardship and accountability. And as you'll see in a little while in the software, we do have some things in order to help with that, especially an event log, different user logins and permissions, so it's not just one person who's able to take your finances and kind of run things amok. So what exactly does that mean? What does accountability look like in a church? There's kind of two sides to this, and I think it's very important to talk about both of them. The first thing we want to do, I've already alluded to before, is that we want to prevent anybody who's ill-intentioned from doing wrong. We all know that we're all sinful, we live in a sinful world, and there are people out there. But maybe more importantly, or more realistic for many of us, is that we want to prevent the well-intentioned from making mistakes. And that's really important. I know for me, as I'm getting ready for these webinars, I always notice, oh, I didn't enter this right. I maybe missed a 0 or missed a 9. And so one main thing the software does is not only does it track everybody's activities, it makes it easy for you to go back and edit and reform transactions while still keeping that audit trail so that if you do make a mistake, you don't have to worry about it being unfixable. That mistake is always able to be corrected so that your church, your fellow congregation members can know exactly what's going on with your church finances. So in a congregation, we know that there are many different people in many different roles keeping track of your church finances. So at your church, you might have any or all of these things. We have volunteer ministry treasurers, somebody who might be paid either full-time or part-time as a finance coordinator. You have somebody who's been elected as your church treasurer who might serve for a short term or a very long term, depending on your church's history and your needs. And you also might have a finance board. So this software is designed that whether you have one of these people in one of these roles or maybe you have multiple people in these roles, everybody is able to have different access levels and permissions according to that role. And so with those different positions in mind, we kind of focused on two key personas, two key types of people that we thought would be using the software. One we'll say is our church treasurer, and this might be someone at your church who is an experienced accountant, either in their day job is still an accountant or has retired from accounting, but no matter what they do during their day job, they want to be able to oversee all aspects of your church finances. They care deeply about the details and truly rely on that audit trail to be able to manage all the different things that are going on at your church. But we also knew that your church is full of willing volunteers. These might be people who are used to balancing their checkbook at home, maybe are willing just to enter transactions to come in for a few hours on a weekly basis, who truly care about the ministry, that mission of advancing the gospel, and don't want to make a mistake. So with these two types of people in mind, we wanted to make sure that Church360 Ledger was easy enough and accountable enough for both of these people to work with the software. So what we'll do today with all of those things in mind is we'll go through a real life example. Since we're coming up on Lent and Easter today, our theme for the day is going to be managing and accounting for if you had some type of outreach event at your church. And hopefully within that example, we'll explore all areas of the software. And at the end of the day, I hope you can at least begin to answer this question: how can I use Church360 Ledger to support my ministry? In that effort today about efficiently tracking your church finances, we're going to use that real life example that covers all these scenarios. So we'll talk about what to do when you have multiple income streams. So you might have people donating, you might have businesses who are giving money for a certain cause. We'll talk about ways to account for all of those. We'll talk about multiple expense accounts. So in that example of an outreach type event, you might have some expenses for tracts and giveaways. You might have some expenses for communications. You might have some expenses for food or drinks that you're giving away. We'll show you how to account for all of those with Church360 Ledger. We also will talk about how to set a specific budget, whether it's for just an event like this or your whole church. Our software does integrate in some ways with Microsoft Excel for spreadsheets, so I'll show you quickly how that can work if your current system is in a spreadsheet software like that. As I've mentioned quite a few times already today, we'll talk about how ministry leaders in different areas can gain different types of access. And then we'll finish up by showing you all the reporting features in Church360 Ledger. So with that in mind, let's get started. If you guys can give me just a few quick minutes here, I'm going to switch my screens to get the software up here. You can see this is our main software for Church360 Ledger. This is a test account I use. And I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit here to make sure that everybody can see everything I'm doing today. We'll start at that resolution. So as you can see, every church will have your own secure login and password. This part of your login here is called your subdomain. So if you've already set up a test account, you might know your subdomain. Maybe it's like stpauls.360ledger.com. This is the URL you can use to access your software from anywhere when you have that set subdomain. Each person using Ledger will have a different email address and password in the login from the same screen. If you at any time forget your password, you can click on this link here to get a password reset link. Also, if you're just getting started and you're not sure how to unlock your account, we also have this quick link here that will show you that. But since I'm used to signing in here, I'll just sign in. And we'll go quickly through our main home screen right now, and I'll circle back around to this at the end. So there's a few kind of levels of detail to get used to here on our home screen. On the top bar, we have our utilities over here on this right-hand side, and then on the left-hand side, you can see this is our selector for books. So if your church maybe had a school or a preschool, you can select and switch between the different books there. And in a minute, I'll show you how to set up books in the first place. This ledger icon is also very handy. So this is always at the top here. So if I'm maybe looking at my liability accounts, you can see this doesn't change, and I'm able to click on the ledger icon to take me back to home. So that's wherever you are, just know you can always get home by going there. This second level of menus here. It has a few important things. This is your home selector to let you know what you are. And then another thing, kind of like that home button, is that on any screen you can start a new transaction. And we have 5 main types of transactions here in Ledger: transfers, deposits, payments, checks, and journal entries. So no matter where you are or what you're doing, rest assured you'll be able to find that. Now this kind of lower portion of the screen is what changes depending on what you're doing. The home screen here just shows kind of a summary of all your assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. You can see each of those have their own little graph. And then we have a larger graph to show you your complete total financial picture over time. Over here you can see we have an Export to Excel button, a Print button, and perhaps this is the most important button. This is the date selector. So depending on which date select, you can see that these graphs change over time. So if I went to Q2, which hasn't started yet, you can see that there's no graph here, no transaction line items. So if you're ever in Ledger and you think you're missing a few transactions, that would always be my first bit of advice to make sure that you do have the right date range. We're going to go back to Q2 of 2017 here. So notice you can select by year, quarter, month, or you can add your own custom date range. So if I wanted to go all the way back to maybe April of 2016 until April 2017, you can see that everything updates here. My balance graph updates, and then also my transactions will update down here. And then one more thing to be aware of, which I'll circle back to in a few minutes, is this little information button right here. We have a page-sensitive help system in Ledger. So that means that depending on what you're doing, what your task at hand is, you can always see which relevant help articles are most readily available. So those will come over the suggested article section. So you can see the first suggested article here is about our data conventions, and you can see that some of the things I just went over here are on that help system. So you can always get there. You can also search the help system. So say if you just wanted to search about liabilities, and you can see that these results change here. If you've looked through the help system and you absolutely can't find anything at all, you're always very welcome to send us a message, which you're also able to do through that help center right here. You can just send your feedback, or it'll give you the number to call. I always find that very helpful, especially when I'm preparing. If I have a question, I can go back there. Well, now we're going to kind of start our walkthrough in a way that we're showing what you would do if you first opened your account and you hadn't done anything yet. So the first thing I would recommend doing is setting up your books, and you can access those by clicking on your settings cog and then going down here to books. And you can see that all your books are listed here. If you had a ton of books for some reason, which we don't recommend, but if you did, you could filter and search them. So if you knew you wanted to look for your church book, you can see that changes. If you wanted to delete a book, say you weren't using your preschool book, you can delete that from right here, and you'll get a confirmation message up at the top here to let you know your book list deleted. If you wanted to add a book, you just click this Add a New One button and say maybe I'm going to add my preschool book back, so we'll add preschool. You select your starting month for your fiscal year. An important thing to note here is that your fiscal years don't have to start in January. So if you're one of those churches, maybe you start in July, that's okay. The software is customizable for that. And then you also can pick your starting date. And this is going to be really important when you're first getting set up with Ledger. This will be kind of the date of your first transaction. So maybe if you're starting here on February 20th, but you know you wanted to enter transactions back from the beginning of the year, make sure that starting date is set on time, because it's really hard to change after you do that. Once everything is set the way you want it, you can click Submit, and then you can see you get a message up here that says that your book was created, and then it's also listed down here. As I was saying earlier, you can also switch between books once they've been created. So I just click on the book name. You can see I'll switch to my preschool book, and since we haven't done anything, it's empty over here. And then to switch back is very easy. I just changed my book to church, and we're back where we were. The next thing to go through quickly is fiscal years. I've had a couple churches in the past few months tell me, oh, well, right now we're on a January to December fiscal year, but we want to switch to July to June. Can we do that? Yes, definitely. All you need to keep in mind is to go to this fiscal year section when you're ready to change, and then you select from this drop-down menu the starting month of your next fiscal year. So if you were one of those churches who was going to a fiscal year that started in July, you would just select July there, click Save, and then you would have that fiscal year appear down here. It would say like 2017, July to June 2018. I'm not going to do that today just so my test account stays in line. But I just want to let you know that option is available, and after you've created your first book, you're definitely not locked into that fiscal year if something major were to change at your church. After you have your books and your fiscal years set up, the next big thing is going to be your chart of accounts. And so there's the way to access your chart of accounts to get started setting up is to go up here to your settings cog again, and then you'll select chart of accounts. And we'll give it just a minute here. There we go. You can see your chart of accounts is divided into 4 areas, which are collapsible and expandable. I think my software is a little slow today. But yet you have assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. And if you have questions about what any of those are, we do have a help article on that. I can just show you that quick. It's called Basic Terms to Understand When Using Ledger. So again, if you're not one of those people who's used to working with finances, everything's explained here. So assets are things your congregations own. So you'll see in our example today, we have bank accounts under assets. You can also have restricted assets, restricted funds. So if one of your bank accounts was maybe a subset of your checking account that was restricted to the youth group, you can set that up in here with a restricted fund. We have liabilities, which are things your congregation owes, income, and expenses. So you can always access that article here. I know I've used that quite a bit in my time here. Here's the assets main view. You have 2 options from within assets, and I'm just going to zoom out a little bit so we can see everything. You can add a new account and a new category. So a category is kind of like a placeholder for a bunch of accounts. I kind of like to think of it as if you have files and folders on your computer. So a category would kind of be the equivalent of a folder, and the account would be equivalent of the file. And the important thing to remember with categories for all of these, assets, liabilities, income, and expenses, is that the totals from your accounts roll up into your category, and we'll see that in just a few minutes. And then we also have the restricted funds here. So you can see I have my unrestricted first checking account, and then down below, these are all the restricted funds I've added throughout time. Liabilities works the same way, except you don't have those restricted funds, but you do have accounts and categories. And then we have income and expenses. So today I'm going to add some income and expense accounts just to show you how quick and easy it can be. You can see I have a bunch set up here already, but I want to add some things under our events category. So events has been already set up as a category here, and there's a couple ways you can recognize, hey, this is a category, it's not an account. One is the indentation, and perhaps more importantly, this little kind of teal line here on the left lets you know that these 2 things are categories. So you see you can have 2 different levels of categories. So it's within my larger events category, I've already kind of set up one event for a live nativity, but I want to make another category, which is going to be our Easter outreach event. So all I did, in case I went too quickly there, I just clicked new category, and then I'm going to just write in Easter outreach. I know my church for Easter does an Easter egg hunt as outreach, but your church, whatever you do, whether it's during Lent or Easter, you can add something like that, or if you're just adding maybe something for your general youth group. You notice you can click and drag these things here, and then you can change the indentation. So I'm going to indent this to kind of the middle here, and I'm just going to place it. And then let's say under our Easter outreach event, we had kind of those 3 account types I was talking about earlier. So we had giveaways, And if you have a numbering system for your accounts at your church, you can enter that here. I'm not going to do that today. And then you can enter your initial balance. So this is going to be very useful if you're coming in mid-year, or if you're setting up your accounts and you already have a balance from whatever funds you or software you were using before. You could enter your initial balance that way. You do need to enter something even if it's just 0. So then I'll click submit, and you can see giveaways was added at the bottom here. But if I wanted to make it kind of a sub account under the Easter outreach category, all I'd have to do is click and drag and then indent. So I'm going to do that a couple more times just so you guys can see how it works. So we'll have maybe giveaways, we'll have communications, add my initial balance, click submit, and then we'll also add a sub account for food and drink maybe. So we'll enter your account number if need be, enter your initial balance, and then you just click and drag and indent. So click, drag, indent over here. I'm going to save my changes, and this is kind of a nice feature too here. Before anything saves, you have the option to confirm. So Ledger will let you know if you've rearranged anything, how many categories and accounts you've created. If you see something on here and you're like, oh, I didn't mean to do that, you can always click discard changes, and that will just kind of throw out anything you did that you didn't want to do. But I'm going to save those changes for now, and then no matter what you do, you'll have this green confirmation box here. In this instance, it lets me know that my chart of accounts was updated. So I'm going to kind of create some parallel expense accounts here. So we'll go just again under events, let's see, Easter outreach, and I'll click and drag up here, maybe right under my life nativity, and I'll just indent it 1 this time. And then I'll add my new account. So we had communications. And notice here, I'm not using my mouse every time. You can use your tab and enter keys here, which is a really good shortcut once you're used to using Ledger. So we had communications, we had giveaways, submit, and then we had food and drink. Oh, sorry about that. Food and drink. And then we'll click submit. So then I'll just click and drag, get everything organized here. I know this for a lot of people, when you get started in Ledger, it can be kind of hard because you want to just jump in right away to using the software and getting things set up. But I definitely would encourage you guys to take your time when you're getting your chart account set up, especially if you're maybe coming from not an accounting background or you don't know exactly how things work. Definitely take the time to think about this, because if you get your chart of accounts set up in an incorrect way or a way that's not usable for you, it's a lot harder to go and fix it on the back end than it is to kind of go and just spend a little bit more time up front. I know we get a lot of support calls about that, so just kind of some words of wisdom there today. Okay, lets us know our chart of accounts is updated, and I'm pretty happy with how things are working for our chart of accounts today. I always might come back later and fix it, but this will work for our purposes in the webinar today. The next thing I want to do is talk about budgets. And it's really important to remember that you can't set your budgets unless you've created your chart of accounts. So we're going to say our chart of accounts is set, and now we're going to go into here for budgets. So I'm just going to give the software a couple minutes to load. And once it's loaded, you can see everything. It becomes that kind of dark gray color. A few important things to note here. Your categories are always going to be in dark gray, whether they're kind of the primary category or a subcategory. Let me go down here. Here's a good example, like our live nativity and Easter outreach. Even though those are subcategories, they are in that gray color. And that's really important to know because all your category totals will roll up. So say that for Easter outreach, we wanted $500 in giveaways. We wanted maybe $100 for food and drink. And then we wanted maybe $50 for communications if we were making a sign. Hopefully what you noticed here was that as soon as I updated any of these numbers, the total in my Easter outreach rolled up and also in my events rolled up. So now that you're watching that, let me just change something quickly. So you can see I deleted communications. My Easter outreach totals went back to 600. And then if I add $25 in here, again, that works just that way. Now, there's also something else you might have noticed is that I'm adding all of these things in the total column here. And when you add your budgets in the total column, you can see that the amounts are split equally among the months. So you can see that it's split through January, February, June, July, August, September, October. But that's not always realistic. For a lot of churches we've heard from, they just want to enter their total budget for the month and Ledger figures it out. But for something like an event where maybe you only get your income and expenses in a few months of the year, you can also divide it up that way. So I'm going to go clear this out quickly and let you know how you could do it. So Lent starts in March and April, and say maybe that's the same time period you wanted to start advertising, maybe asking for donations for a certain event, you can just edit the number in 1 month and then Ledger will do the rest of the math for you. So say maybe I was expecting $250 in donations for March and $250 donations in April, and that was it. I wasn't expecting any Easter outreach donations for the rest of the month. You can see that my total is updated there in the top total column for each month, and then also in the total column here over here on the left. So we can say the same thing. Maybe we're thinking about $50 each month for food and drink, and then for communications we were going to expect $25 in income each month. Once you're all set, you'll have to scroll way down to the bottom here and then save your changes. And it'll let you know your budgets were updated. Now those were my income accounts, I believe. Let me make sure I wasn't lying. Yep, so these are under the income category. You can see way up here. But there's also another way to do this, and I want to show you quickly, and that is that you can copy and paste things over from Ledger into Excel. So if you're going to do that, I would encourage you to scroll to the top of your screen here and then click on this button that says Exporting to Excel. You can also use your copy and paste from the browser, but the most important part to do is export and not just copy out of your browser, because when you export this way, it lets you know that all of your chart of accounts stay the same. You don't need to worry about anything like that. So you can see it creates an Excel document on your screen here. It'll give me just a couple minutes so I can get everything closed out. And I'll move this over here so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so this is what the budget screen looks like when Excel. You might notice that some of these look like this, a bunch of hashtags. If that happens to you, don't worry, it's not an error. Just double click on your column header here and it'll expand the column. It just lets you know you had too many characters in there for that size of a column. And another thing you can see here is that some of these things export to Excel as static values and others export as a formula. So you can see that the income total cell is automatically adding together everything underneath it. So just as in Ledger, those things automatically added, you can use that same kind of philosophy here in Excel. Now I'm going to scroll down here. You can see everything we added from Easter expenses took place over here, or income, excuse me. And now I want to add in some expenses. So say I just wanted to play around in Excel. I was used to working with Excel, which generally I am more used to working with Excel, and I wanted to add in my expenses. All I would have to do is just do whatever I wanted here. So maybe say we were even though we had $500 in income, we were expecting to spend less than that. We over budgeted. So maybe for communications, we just did 25 and 25, and then for food and drink, maybe we just wanted 50 in that 1 month. Once you're set here, the nice thing is that you can copy any of these back into Ledger. So I'm going to just take this whole set of cells. You can copy two ways. You can either right click or you can use my favorite method, which is Control+C. And see it's highlighted there. Then when I go back to Ledger, I'm going to scroll down to that portion of my budgets, which I wanted to enter. Do this here. I'm going to do Control-V. and you can see that everything got added in there. Now actually, it looks like that didn't work out right, so I'll go check into that later. That might just be a ticket. But usually how it works is you won't need to copy anything else into there. It'll be all set. Let me just quickly figure this out quick. We'll add this back in, and then we'll add this back. So that's a nice feature. You can do it either with your entire budget, or you can do it with just a portion of your budget like you did there. Once you're set, you can just click Save Changes, and then it lets you know your budgets were updated. Okay, now that we've gone through budgets and we've got through your chart of accounts, we're going to go talk about different types of transactions. And this is kind of really the core of Ledger, these different types of transactions. So there's 5 types of transactions. We have transfers, deposits, payments, checks, and journal entries. And within those, there's kind of 2 or 3 subcategories of transactions. You have your just one-off transactions, and those we'll talk about here. So if you had a one-time transfer, you would just click on that transaction button, enter a transfer. Maybe we wanted to transfer some money into our Easter outreach fund. So transfer to Easter outreach. Then you pick your asset account and say we wanted to transfer $1,000 here, and then you pick which sub-account you want to transfer into. So if we wanted to transfer into communications, actually we want to transfer into our events fund. We'll do it into our outreach fund here. Then you select which asset account you're going to transfer into. So you can only transfer between asset to asset accounts. You can only transfer between like accounts there. Then you can click Save. It lets you know your transaction was created, and then if you go back to the home screen here, you should see that our transfer did take place. And if I go click on my assets mini graph here, I go to first checking account, and then if I scroll over to outreach, you can see that that amount increased for my outreach fund here. Now there's also different types of transactions, and those would be recurring transactions. So say that transfer you just did, you didn't want it just to be a one-time thing. You wanted it to occur at the same time every month. So this might be useful if you're used to maybe just transferring money, say, into your youth account or something every month. So we'll do another transfer to youth. And maybe your church has decided that from the general fund, you're going to give $500 to your youth every month. So you'll just pick asset to asset, and then I'll type in my youth fund here. And then instead of clicking Save, what I would do is I would click this Make Recurring button, and then you have a couple options here. You can name your recurring transaction. So if you wanted to just name it transfer from checking to savings, transfer to youth, whatever you want to name it. And then you get to choose the frequency of your recurrence. So you can choose whether it happens weekly, monthly, or yearly. If you can do every single week, other week, third week, or fourth week, same for month and year. And then you can choose by day too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this happens every month. You can either do like on the first Sunday or the first day. You could also do the 15th day, whatever works at your church. Then you can click Save, and it lets you know a recurring transaction was created. Now if you start making a lot of these when you get set up, and then all of a sudden you're getting recurring transactions, you don't know where they're coming from, here's a few things to keep in mind. You can always check your recurring transactions by going to Settings and then clicking Recurring Transactions. And you can see here's a complete list of my recurring transactions. So this list is filterable too. So if you wanted to see my transfer to youth fund, I could just click here. And then if I wanted to get rid of that, you can just click this minus sign, click Delete, and that will stop that recurring transaction from coming over. Now, once the recurrence is set, it'll appear up here in your pending transactions view. You notice I don't have any right now. It's set my pending transaction from members, which we'll get to a little bit later. But if I did have a recurring transaction that was like that, say it was my youth fund transaction, it would come up here. I'd have to click on it, and then confirm it. So one important thing to keep in mind is just because you set up a recurring transaction, that doesn't mean it's set in stone. You still have the options to confirm them, to edit any amount. So a really good example of that here, I'll go back to my list, is, let me look up my water bill. So you can see here, I've set up a recurring transaction for my water bill payment on the 21st of every month. Now, when I set that up, I just set in an amount of $100. But every month, I can look in my water bill, I can change that amount, and it'll enter the exact amount for my recurring transaction. So one way I like to think of these recurring transactions is kind of like a reminder system. So even though you don't know maybe exactly what your water bill or your electricity bill is going to be every month, I would recommend to just set a recurring transaction. And then when that comes up, the reminder will pop up here in your pending notifications, and then you'll be able to change it and edit it as need be. Some of you might also notice that under recurring transactions, we have imported transactions. And this is from one of our imports. We do import with Paychecks, which is a payroll software. So if your church does use Paychecks for payroll, you can import those transactions into Ledger as often or as not often as you would like. The other type of imported transaction is shown up here. That's with Church360 members. You can see that any offerings entered from the offerings view in members do come over to Church360 Ledger. You'll be able to distinguish these types of pending transactions from the ones I was talking about earlier by this little icon here. This is our members logo. It'll let you know what type of pending transaction it was, how much it was, and when it was given. So I know this is something I added in here this morning, and it was supposed to be my offerings from last weekend. So we'll do offerings, February, we'll do the 18th and 19th. You can change the date, and then you can just pick your asset accounts, and then you match your funds. These little icons here are your fund names in members to your funds in Ledger. So I'll just look up building fund, and you can see I have an income set for building fund. I have one of these off for each of these equivalents. Education, general, music, your social fund, vacation, Bible school, women's, my young adults ministry, and my youth fund. And the nice thing is that after you've matched these for members one time, Ledger remembers that. So even though I had to go through and match these funds today, next time I go into Ledger, it'll remember all of these relationships for me. One nice thing about Ledger, which we were talking about a little bit earlier, is that Ledger automatically calculates debits and credits for you. So if you're not really familiar with that language, but you just know where things are coming from and where things it needs to go to, that's okay. You just enter that information up here, and then you can see a preview of your debits and credits automatically calculated down here. I'm going to click Save, and it lets you know your transaction was created. That debits and credits preview, I think, is especially helpful when you're doing something like writing a check. So that'll be the next thing we do here. So you just go again to New Transaction and Check. And so one of the nice things in Ledger is that you get a preview of your check here to make sure you're doing it right. So say I was writing a check for giveaways for Easter outreach. You can select your payee here. So I have CPH as a payee. We'll just say that we bought books from CPH. You can enter your check number. And watch as I enter this, my check number appears automatically up here in that right-hand corner. So let me do that one more time. We'll say check number 495. And then you can select where the money's coming from. So if we took the money from our outreach funds for maybe $75, and then we wanted to expense it to our giveaways from Easter Outreach, we could do it right there. You can see that it looks just like a regular check. Your memo appeared, your payee appeared, and then your debits and credits were down here. I'm going to just click Save on that right now. And you'll see that you get a message up at the top here letting you know the check was added to your print queue, and you might be wondering where that is. This little printer button up here is the print queue. That lets you know how many checks you have left to print. If you don't have a printer set up, that's okay. You can just click this check mark button and then do mark as printed. The important thing to remember here is that once either you've selected mark as printed or print, you're not able to go back and edit that transaction. So be careful. Once you've printed your checks, you're not able to go and edit that unless you do make a journal entry. I'm just going to mark this one as printed, and as soon as you mark something as printed, it gets removed from your print queue. That's really helpful for keeping things organized. You never have to wonder, did I print this? Did I not print this? Or anything like that. Now, you might be wondering, what's the difference between a check and a payment? And that's a really good question. A check is the way you record something that you made with a physical check. So whether you printed the check out from your computer or you kind of wrote it by hand, I would recommend using the check feature. Now, if you make electronic payments for something, so say I was doing that same transaction as I had before, but I paid for it online. I didn't write a check. Use the payment feature for that, so you can just write another memo. We'll do maybe Arch Books for Easter Outreach. And I can select my same payee again. And then we'll select where it's coming from. Maybe we just bought $25 worth of those. And then we can select again our giveaways. See the debits and credits calculated automatically, and then you can click Save. Now you may have noticed there when I was entering payees that there were already some in my list of fields. That's because I've entered these once before. So you can see payees are down here, and you can see here's my list of all my payees. I use CPH quite a lot in my webinars. That's why there's so many here. But say for our example today, we wanted to make a new payee that was going to be maybe our local sign making company. So to do that, you just click at the bottom of your list here. You can add a new one. I'll just say First Sign Company. And you can add their address, Clarity Street, St. Louis, Missouri. And you can also add a phone number here. And then if you want to make any notes about your payees, you can do that right here. So if you want to say that this is the company we use to help us print signs, you can write that there, whatever you want to do. I'm having troubles typing today. I'm sorry about that. When you're all set, you can click Submit, and then the next time you go to make a payment, that payee will be listed in your list of payees in the transaction screen. Another nice thing is that you can see your history of payees. So you can see here I have my history with the CPH payee. If there's a payee that you maybe used to use but don't use anymore, you also have the option to deactivate it. So you can do that by just clicking this little minus symbol and then clicking deactivate. So that's very nice if maybe a business goes out of business and you don't want to do any more commerce with them. You can always deactivate them as a payee so you don't mistakenly pay them again. So I think that covers transfers, payments, and checks. The next thing we'll want to do is deposit. This is very similar to our transfer screen. You can see that. So maybe somebody brought in a donation of church for food for outreach event. So food, maybe they got a donation for outreach and Easter. And you can see there's a character limit. So I'll just change it to outreach event Easter. If that occurred in a past date, maybe you only come in once a week or once a month at church, you can select that here. If there was a payee associated, you can do that, although with deposits that's very uncommon. And then you can just select where that goes. So we can say it was put into the outreach fund. Maybe they made a $100 donation, and then we wanted it to apply to what did I call that? Communications for Easter outreach. And I could just click Save here, and it'll let you know your transaction was created. So let's just check in here so we can make sure we have this right. And you can see that all of these things I just added in here were recorded. So you can see my 2 payments and checks to CPH were added here. My transfer was added down here. And then if we go back, I think that was on the 17th. Here we go. Here's my deposit for the outreach fund for Easter. The fifth and final type of thing you can record is a journal entry. And a journal entry is one of those features that we added to the software that's completely necessary, but maybe people who are only used to doing accounting maybe on a full-time basis or have been educated can use that. So you'll see the journal entry screen is a little bit different. It doesn't automatically calculate debits and credits for you. It lets you do all of that yourself. So if you ever need to make an adjustment, you can always do that in a journal entry screen. But if you're like me and you're a little unsure about where exactly the debits and credit goes, there's another way to make a journal entry that results in kind of that same audit trail, that same tracking, and that's by editing a transaction. So we're going to go back here to our payment to CPH for the Arch books, and I'm just going to edit this transaction. Maybe I only put in the amount for the outreach for the Arch books, but I forgot shipping and handling. So maybe shipping and handling was $5.99. So if I need to edit it, you can see I clicked on that. Instead of the message up here that says that I'm creating a new payment, this message lets me know that I'm editing a payment, and that's very important. If I wanted to void it, I could void it right here, but in this case, I'm just going to add in my shipping. So maybe we said that with shipping, this was $29.99, but we only paid $25.99. Now, if I did this but didn't make both sides balance, you'll see that Ledger gives me an error message. And this goes back to what we were saying before, is that Ledger has some built-in checks to prevent you from making mistakes. So if you're doing something and your line items don't balance, or if Ledger's unsure if you did it the right way, you'll get this red box and it lets you know what's going on here. And it says that this $4.99 on this side has to equal on this side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my $4.99 up here. I'll change this to $29.99. And you can see as soon as I did this, these figures in the line box below go away. I can add an amendment memo and say something like, forgot included shipping and handling. And then I can click Save. So it says a new transaction was created for this correction. So you can see that up here at top, it has my new amount, and there's also a message that lets me know my transaction has been edited. And then if I click on this little arrow, it lets me know when it was edited. Here's the original amount, here's the final amount, and here are the changes. There's another way to see this too, and that's in your General Ledger report. So if I go up here to Reports and click on General Ledger, you can see that this was added as a correction. So essentially what Ledger did here, without me going to the journal entry screen, it created a journal entry for me and automatically included all of those things. You can see you can click on any of these, you can group by payee or account, and that will record it for you. Now there's a few other places where Ledger records these types of items for you, and one of those places is the event log. So all you have to do to access the event log is to click on your Reports button up here, and then click Event Log. And as that loads, hold on here, sometimes it's a little bit slow. And it looks like this is not working. Let me check my new date range to see what my event log is doing. Okay, well unfortunately that's not working today. I'm going to put a ticket in with our developers after that to make sure that, oh, here we go, it's just a little slow. So here's what the event log looks like. Sorry for the false alarm, but the event log has a bunch of key and critical information. So it has a timestamp for every type of journal entry, any transaction. So you can see if a payee was created, there's an event log for that. You can see if my accounts were created or destroyed, there's transactions for that. You can see you can even access certain transactions from the event log. So if you wanted to see where I edited things, you can do that right here. There's a bunch of things you can do in the event log. You can also just search for certain types of actions. So if you want to see everything that was destroyed during a certain time, you're able to filter just by that. You can see transactions, payees, accounts, or budgets. You can see which user did it, and you can see I'm the only user that uses our software here. But if you had multiple users, you could even refine it down to a certain action of a certain type by a certain user on a certain day and see everything that was going on. Now that reminds me, I didn't show you guys how to set up different users. So we're going to do that right now. So to set up different users, all you have to do is go over to the settings cog over here and set up users. But before we do that, we need to talk about roles. So roles are different areas of access that give different people different permission levels. So you can see I have a bunch of different roles here. I even have one for outreach director, and it lets them create different types of transactions. It lets them see or create different types of accounts, and it applies those roles to books. So you can see I have all my roles here. To create a new one, you just click add a new one. And for this, maybe I'll put Easter Outreach Director. In the section where it says this role applies to, it's asking which book it applies to. So I'll say this applies to the church view, church book, and then you can select whether this person can manage chart of accounts, which means they can create and edit different accounts, whether they can view all the accounts or just view a subset of accounts. We're going to select the subset of accounts just so you know how that works. And then you can select which transactions they're able to do. So if they can deposit money, but you don't want them to create journal entries or make any payments, but maybe they can print checks. So maybe if your ministry leader could print something after it had been created, you can do that. Click submit, and it lets you know the role is created. Now, the reason I went to roles before I went to users is that roles apply to users. So I'm going to first select my selected accounts here. And since this is an Easter Outreach Director, we maybe only want them to be able to see the Outreach Fund, Easter Outreach category, and the Easter Outreach category for expenses. And this is a nice little area where, again, our categories come into play, because all I had to do was click on that category name, and then everything under it was selected. Now this portion of the screen saves automatically, so I can just click the little X here. And then when I click submit, you can see my Easter Outreach Director can see 8 selected accounts. Now that that role has been created, I can invite a user here. So all you need to do is to add a new one. And we'll say that our user here is Kira Belton. Let me just go get her email here. Just give me 1 minute. So you just put whoever's email in here, and then you select which roles this person has. So if this person was just the Easter Outreach Director, you can invite them just to that role. If this person was Easter Outreach Director and maybe a Children's Ministry Director, they could have both of those roles. So you can mix and match roles to provide accountability. And again, filtering back to what I was talking about earlier, this is so important to have every user have a separate role and separate login, so that when you go back to your event log, you can see exactly who did what in Church360 Ledger, going back to that accountability we were talking about earlier in the webinar. A few more things I just want to talk about the home screen quickly, and then I also want to talk about how to use the different reports. There's 4 main types of reports. So I'll go a little bit over our hour, but then if you want to start thinking about which questions to ask yourself or even entering those in, now's a great time to do that while I'm wrapping up. So back to our main screen. I know before we went through a brief overview of this, but there's a couple things that'll be really important for you to know. You can access anything that's kind of this teal color from the main screen. So if you wanted to see just your outreach fund, you could click on it here. You can also click into any of these mini graphs up at the top here. So if I wanted to get my outreach fund a different day, I would just select assets, checking account, and then go over to outreach fund here, which I know we did. Oops, I went too fast. We can do outreach fund, which I know I did here, and we'll do for 2016. And you can always click back out by using these buttons at the top. You'll notice also that under Asset Accounts, you have the option to reconcile. I would definitely encourage you to please reconcile your accounts. The easiest way to do this, you can see the screen looks completely different to let you know that this is a different type of activity you're doing. So to reconcile, all you have to do is grab your latest bank statement. You can click on the statement date, enter the starting and ending balance as it appears exactly on your bank statement, and then go through all the transactions that you have in your log. So if your bank statement was for February, you would select that for your statement date. You can go back in time if you need to, and these dates will change automatically with that. And then all you would do is you check off statements as they appear in your bank statement. So it's probably easiest if you had your statement on the desk in front of you with a highlighter, and as soon as you highlighted it, you checked it off also on here. Your goal is to have your off by amount equal 0 so that your statement difference reflects your selected difference. One important thing to keep in mind that after transactions have been reconciled, they can no longer be edited. So please, please, please make sure that you've edited all your transactions and then you reconcile afterwards, because you won't be able to go back and change it like that. We won't go through the whole reconciliation process today, but just know if you did have everything set here, all you need to do is click Save, and as soon as you did that, any transactions that were reconciled would disappear from this reconciliation screen right here. A couple other things to know on our home screen is some of these symbols here, and I might have to move back a little bit forward. You'll see that some of our transactions will appear a lighter gray color on our main screen, and that's to let you know that a transaction can be voided. So if you remember when I was editing my payment a few minutes ago, there was that reddish button that asked if I wanted to void that. If I had clicked that, my transaction would still list here, but you can see that it will let you know it's voided. You can hover and then it'll let you know the date it was voided. If I go back in time even a little bit farther, you can see I've been delinquent about reconciling my test account here. Any transactions that are reconciled will appear on your home screen with this lock button. And if you hover over it, lets you know it's been reconciled. And that's really important to just cue to you that, hey, this is reconciled, it can't be changed anymore. So Ledger's always trying to help you out, give you a few little tips and tools so that you know what's left to do, what's left to do next. The final section we want to go back through today is our reports, and I'm just going to breeze through these really quickly. There's 4 major reports in Ledger. We have our general ledger, income and expense, chart of accounts, and our balance sheet. So the general ledger report is the one we went to a little bit earlier where we were looking at our journal entries, and I'm going to go to 2017. So you can see every single transaction is listed here in your general ledger report. You can filter by type, you can filter by payees or accounts, and you can also group by payees or accounts. So you can see here, when I grouped, these are all of the transactions that don't have a payee, but then you can see down here, my payees are listed up in bold here. And one nice thing, if you did export this view to Ledger, the formatting would remain relatively consistent, so you're able to group that. To ungroup, you just click this ungroup button. You can do the same things with accounts. So if you just wanted to see certain accounts divided up over time, you can do that. And then your memos and your amounts are listed here in your general ledger report. The next type of report is income and expense, and this is the report you'd most often use to assess your budgets versus your actuals to see how much you would have remaining. Now, in your income and expense report, you can show every single category, subcategory, line item. If you didn't want to do that, maybe you just wanted the big picture, you can roll these up, use these arrows here to collapse. So you have income and expense, and then you can get your overall picture for the year where you can say your budgets versus actual, your percent of budget, and how much is left remaining. The next thing is your chart of accounts report. In this report, whereas the other one showed your just your income and expenses. This shows all four categories: assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. You'll see a starting balance, ending balance, total debits, total credits, and then dollar change and percent change over whatever time period you have in the date selector here. So if I went to 2016, these numbers would change over time as well. Final report here is the balance sheet, and this has your assets minus your liabilities, and then the very important thing at the bottom here, your assets less your liabilities, which would be your church's total equity. So those are kind of the four main reports we have in Ledger. They're pretty simple, but again, that was a result of focusing our reports and our tools on church offices and the day-to-day tasks that they were most likely to have. Well, I talked pretty fast, but I think we've gone through all areas of the software. So if you guys can just give me a minute, I will switch back to my slides. Just a few things to wrap up here. I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to start your free 37-day trial at 360ledger.com. You can just put in your name and your phone number, your contact information. We don't ask for any payment information up front. So if you want to try this for yourself, if you want to know if the software will meet your church's specific needs, please go there. Our Ledger trial, you can see, is 37 days, whereas members in Unite are 30 days. And the reason it's 37 is because we wanted to have you let you have time to get your bank statements so you could try at least one reconciliation during your free 37-day trial. So that's important to keep in mind. 360ledger.com for your free trial. I'm going to end here by leaving my contact information up at the top. You can see here's my email and phone number again. Also, if you have a specific question, if you wanted to go through a one-on-one live demo with one of our sales consultants, you could do that by emailing them or calling them using that contact information listed on the screen. And I think that's about it. I actually have one more thing to add that's not on my slides here. And that is that now through the end of the month, through the end of February, we are having a special. So you get $199 off of your startup fee. So if you're thinking about buying and you want to save the most money, just keep in mind that that promotion does end at the end of February. So we want to make sure you guys get the best deal possible. I'm going to leave my contact information up here for just a few more minutes. I don't see any questions, but if you do have questions, now is the perfect time to enter them, and I'll try to answer them as quickly as possible. Again, if you think of something later, just feel free to email me and I can answer you that way as well, or we can talk on the phone. But I see no questions, so I just wanted to say thank you all for coming today, and if I can do anything else to help me out, let me know. Okay, thanks everybody for coming.